Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story about a driver at a small delivery company who found the perfect way to get back at a coworker who spoiled TV shows. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoy the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. Next time, you won't spoil a TV show for me. Years ago, when Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead were still in their infancy, I worked at a small delivery company as a driver. I was generally only in the office for a few minutes a day as I was out in my truck making deliveries. There was this disgusting receptionist working there. When I say disgusting, I mean that she was both a disgusting human being and looked like the bulbous guy from 300 that wanted to join the army. She was racist, homophobic, rude, and just generally a mean person. Since she sat at the front of the office, she decided that yelling conversations across the room was the best way to communicate with anyone more than 3 feet away from her. So one morning after The Walking Dead had aired, I walked into the office and headed straight for her. I knew she'd be spouting out spoilers about the show, so I thought I'd let her know that I hadn't seen it and asked if she could wait 2 minutes until I left for the day, until she had any spoiler-heavy conversations about it. I wasn't the biggest fan of the show by any means, and like most people I know, stopped watching it after a few seasons, but early on in the show's run, I was still pretty into it. I approached her and asked if she was okay waiting to converse about the show, but she just stared at me. A dirty, bent smile spread across her wrinkly face, her meth-head teeth dancing in the fluorescent light like broken little rocks on the seashore. I guess you should have watched it last night. She then turned to one of our coworkers and asked how they felt about a character dying in the episode last night, continuing to spout out any spoilers she could possibly muster. She looked back to make sure I was still standing there listening. I froze in anger, wondering how she could be such a jerk and plotting my revenge. I stood by her desk, staring at her as the folds in her hut-like face flab about like the wings of an overweight bird. I thought about how much she loved Game of Thrones. It was her favorite. She talked about it all the time. I asked her once if she'd read the books, and she laughed at me like I was an idiot for having read a book. At this point, Game of Thrones was still following the plot of the book for the most part, and I decided that this was how my revenge would be unfolded. After making sure everyone else was out of earshot, I tapped her shoulder and stared her dead in her lazy eye. I then dropped every Game of Thrones spoiler I could possibly imagine, surely ruining the next couple of seasons for this woman that hated spoilers more than anything. She finally stopped smiling. A blank, unintelligent look on her face. She forced a smile and said, "That's okay, I don't care." I could see the pain behind her eyes. She cared. She's yelled at someone once when they spoiled a minor Game of Thrones plot point. She cared. I shrugged my shoulders and turned to leave, but before I did, I looked back and said, "I guess you should have read the books." The resident bog monster of my office never spoiled a television show for me ever again. Edit. Apparently it's important that I point out that most people didn't stop watching The Walking Dead after the first few seasons as the numbers rose over time. However, most people I knew, and arguably a lot of hardcore fans that were disappointed by the direction the show took, stopped watching. Good job, OP. That's what she gets for spoiling a TV show for you and everyone else. What gets me is she hates shows being spoiled for her, but she can't give someone else the same courtesy? Wow. And our second story. Angry dude argues with me while stealing the items I was in the middle of paying for. This happened just before COVID. I used to work in a restaurant. We had a deal with the local Aldi, supermarket chain big in Europe that had moved to Australia in recent decades, where they'd ship in ingredients for us in bulk with a slight discount, and we'd order every 2 weeks and pay 50% in advance and 50% on pickup. Since they worked on a quota system, they loved us for it. On this particular day, I was going to make our fortnightly pickup. For some context, their uniforms in Aldi are a bright blue shirt with like charcoal trousers, short skirt, etc. At the restaurant I worked at, there wasn't a uniform for back-of-house kitchen staff only. Some guidelines, so I was wearing a bright blue t-shirt with some patterns on it. It wasn't collared like the uniform, but still blue. So there I was, chatting to the cashier, who by this point I was quite familiar with. She was pretty cute, and at the time I was working up the courage to ask her out, so yeah, long chat while she put through our massive order. Stacks of boxes of buttermilk, bags of flour, drinks, oil, etc. While we were chatting, I didn't notice the 50-year-old guy at the next checkout queue grabbing some of the boxes of Coke cans. I only noticed when the cashier pointed it out to me. So obviously I walked over and confronted him. I'd already worked 8 hours with another 6 ahead of me, so I wasn't about to take any of this BS. I asked him, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing with those? They're paid for." To which he replied, "F off, kid. Paid for by who? Quit flirting with your BH girlfriend and get back to work." Now, I was raised to respect my elders and all that, but this dude was the epitome of everything wrong with that generation. So I started going off on him that I didn't work here, and if I did, I wouldn't let him in the store. Don't even remember what I said from then on since we were both yelling. Do know it was pretty colorful though. Eventually, the manager of the branch who comes to help me load up so he can sort out the invoice was called and had to drag us away from each other so we didn't end up in a fist fight. Thanks to the cashiers, it all got resolved while I went and cooled off. By the time I got back in a few minutes after, it was sorted and I could finish paying and load up. Pretty sure my old work still orders there to this day. Never did get that cute cashier's number because COVID. Edit to add a bit of a response. I'm absolutely not proud of this incident. It was a key turning point in getting my life turned around. I hope that anyone who's at that place or knows someone at that place who puts themselves under those conditions can hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel and get out of there. It took me moving back to the country I was born in to get back to where I wanted to be as a person. Also, I'd like to add, I'm glad I never got her number. She didn't need the stress in her life knowing me at that time would have caused. Also, being in a romantic relationship with somebody working 70 hours a week every week for the indefinite future isn't conducive to healthy quality time together. And our next story. Yeah, we hit your car. No, you can't have my information. This is a quick one. I was pulling into a clinic parking lot to pick up my wife following a procedure. She thought she'd be able to drive after, but decided not to for safety reasons. As I was pulling in, I saw a car backing out very slowly. No problem. I stopped well back to give them space. They pulled forward and started to reverse again to get lined up to drive out and backed right into my wife's parked car. It was a low-speed bump, but we just spent $760 getting that bumper repaired and repainted. I motioned for them to pull over so we could sort it out in case there was any damage. The couple tried to drive away, so I blocked the road and jumped out to go talk to them. The old lady in the passenger seat immediately started shrieking about how I was not letting them leave. "Why are you doing this?" "Ma'am, you just backed into my wife's car. I just want to get your information." "No, we didn't." "Ma'am, I just watched you back into our car. Please pull over so I can take a look and get your information." "There's not even any damage. We barely felt it. We're going." At this point, I'm feeling a little fed up and walk to the front of her car to photograph their plate. "If you leave, I'm going to report you for hit and run. You just changed your story from not hitting my car to hitting it and knowingly trying to flee." Finally, her husband pulled over. Enter the second old guy who watched this all happen. He pulls up and starts telling me that he saw them hit the car and there isn't any damage. Stop being a jerk about it. "Sir, this doesn't concern you, but thank you for saying they hit the car. There are sensors in the bumper that can be damaged and you can't tell from where you are. You can give them your information if you want, but I'll still want it since you witnessed them back into the car." To make a long story short, they continued to shout about how there was no damage. I finally got the guy's name and phone number, but he refused to give me his insurance information. Whatever, I have his plate number. That's all I wanted, in case the sensors were broken or the new paint needed to be repaired. They tried the whole respect your elders bullcrap at one point, but dropped it when I said that my elders didn't get to use my bumper as their reversing sensors, and if they want to play that card, I'll file a complaint with the driver's license division and suggest they need to have their eyes checked. All this was in the parking lot of a specialty vision clinic. I hate people who do this. There are too many people in the world who use hitting another vehicle as their guide for how far they've backed up. I don't care how gently you did it, you're not supposed to do that. And our last story. Contractors using my power to build neighbor's deck. I live in a rental apartment with a unit directly above me. Our HOA decided to replace all the decks in the complex, which includes a front and back deck for every unit. My unit's part of the only duplex with my neighbor living directly above me, unlike the other quadplex units. The contractors started tearing down the back decks for both my unit and my upstairs neighbor's unit. I expected the noise and inconvenience, but I noticed that the contractors were exclusively using my electrical power for all their work, including my neighbor's deck. I was concerned about the potential increase in my electricity bill, especially since I live in an already expensive area and money is tight. I started documenting the situation, taking photos of my outlets each day, showing heavy-duty extension cords and multiple power tool batteries being charged. I wasn't sure if I should speak up, but the idea of being financially responsible for the construction of 4 different decks didn't sit right with me. After a week of this, I decided to approach the HOA with my concerns. I presented the photos and explained that while I understood the need for the renovations, it wasn't fair for me to bear the cost of the electrical usage. The HOA was surprisingly receptive. They apologized for the oversight and assured me that they would address the issue immediately. The next day, the contractors showed up with their own generators, and the HOA informed me they would cover any additional cost on my upcoming electricity bill. They also mentioned that they would be conducting a review to ensure that no other residents were unfairly charged for the construction work. A few weeks later, the decks were completed, and I received a check from the HOA covering the extra electricity costs. They even sent a small gift basket as a token of appreciation for bringing the issue to their attention. To top it off, they assured me that my rent would not be increased due to the renovations, as the improvements were part of a long-term maintenance plan already budgeted by the HOA. The new decks look great, and I didn't have to worry about an unexpected financial burden. It was a relief to know that sometimes standing up for yourself can lead to positive outcomes without being labeled a Karen. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.